The council chamber was the most beautiful place Sarah Chen had ever seen. It floated in space above a planet called Axis Prime. The chamber was made of crystal that sparkled with 1,000 colors. Through the clear wall, she could see stars stretching in every direction. But Sarah was not here to enjoy the view. She was here because the galaxy was about to tear itself apart. Sarah stood near the back of the massive room. She wore the simple blue uniform of Earth's diplomatic service. The uniform felt too plain compared to the alien beings around her. Some aliens glowed with inner light. Others had bodies made of living metal. A few looked like floating clouds of gas. Sarah felt very small. At the center of the chamber, two groups faced each other. On one side stood the Sovereign Collective. These were the oldest species in the galaxy. They had ruled for millions of years. They believed in pure logic and reason. Their leader was Chancellor Vex, a creature that looked like a giant insect with 8 arms. His body was covered in dark purple armor. When he moved, his arms clicked and clattered. His voice sounded like metal scraping on stone. On the other side stood the Harmony Pact. These species were younger in galactic terms. They believed feelings and emotions were the most important things in the universe. Their leader was Harmonarch Thel. She looked like a being made of living crystal. Light moved through her body in waves of color. When she spoke, her voice sounded like music. But right now that music was angry. Between these two groups hung a hologram. It showed a star system with 7 planets. The planets were rich in resources that could power starships for 1,000 years. Both the Collective and the Pact claimed this system belonged to them. Both sides had history on their side. Both sides had ancient documents proving their right. And both sides had moved their war fleets into position. Sarah looked at the timer on her wrist device. It showed 2 hours and 47 minutes. That was how long they had left. If the leaders did not reach an agreement by then, the fleets would open fire. Billions of people would die. Whole worlds would burn. This was not just another argument. This was the end of everything if they failed. Humanity had only joined the galactic community 50 years ago. Before that, humans did not even know aliens existed. Then a collective scout ship had found Earth. The aliens had been surprised to find another intelligent species. They were even more surprised that humans had not destroyed themselves yet. Most species either became pure logic or pure emotion. Humans were strange. They were both. They used logic and felt emotions at the same time. The aliens found this confusing. Because humans were so young and so strange, the other species did not take them seriously. Earth had a seat on the council, but it was a small seat in the back. When Sarah spoke at meetings, the older species would nod politely and then ignore her. They called humans cute. They called humans interesting. But they did not call humans important. Chancellor Vex raised one of his 8 arms. The room fell silent. His translator device turned his clicking sounds into words everyone could understand. His voice echoed through the chamber. "We have presented our evidence," he said. The disputed system contains 17 billion tons of fuel crystals. The Collective has a population of 3 trillion beings spread across 400 worlds. Our calculations show that we need these resources. The mathematical proof is clear. Logic demands that we take control of this system. This is not about want. This is about need. Numbers do not lie. The beings of the Collective nodded. They saw the logic. The math was correct. Therefore, they should have the system. It was that simple. Harmonarch Thel rose to her full height. Light pulsed through her crystal body in angry red waves. Her musical voice filled the room, but now it sounded like a storm. "You speak of numbers," she sang. "But what about souls? That system is sacred to the Pact. Our ancestors first discovered those stars. Our people sang songs to those suns before your Collective even existed. We have spiritual connections to every planet in that system. Our holy sites are on those worlds. You cannot measure what those places mean to us. You cannot put feelings into an equation, but that does not make them less real." The members of the Harmony Pact swayed and hummed in agreement. They felt the truth in her words. The system was theirs by right of the heart. How could anyone argue with that? And so it went. Back and forth. Logic against emotion. Numbers against feelings. Neither side could understand the other. The Collective could not see why feelings mattered if the math was clear. The Pact could not understand how anyone could ignore the spiritual truth just because of numbers. Sarah watched from her place near the back. She took notes on her datapad. She asked questions when she could, but mostly she listened. She saw something that scared her. Both sides were trapped. Chancellor Vex truly believed his logic was perfect. Harmonarch Thel truly believed her emotions were true. Neither could bend. Neither could see any other way. An elder species called the Mediators tried to help. They were ancient beings who had seen a million conflicts. Their representative stepped forward. It was a being of pure energy contained in a force field. It spoke in a voice like wind through caves. Perhaps we can divide the system, the Mediator suggested. Half for the collective, half for the pact. Each side takes what they need. Impossible, Vex said immediately. His arms clattered with agitation. You cannot divide resources that way. The fuel crystals are concentrated on 3 planets. Splitting them would be inefficient. We would lose 37% of the usable material. The math does not work. Unacceptable, Thel sang, her voice sharp. You cannot cut a holy place in half. The sacred sites must remain whole. The spiritual energy of the system cannot be divided. This solution shows no understanding of what these places mean. The Mediator faded back into the crowd. Its attempt had failed. Other species tried other solutions. All failed for the same reason. Any logical solution ignored the emotional truth. Any emotional solution ignored the logical facts. There was no middle ground because these 2 ways of thinking could not meet. Sarah looked at her timer again. 1 hour and 13 minutes remained. Her assistant, a young man named Marcus, leaned close. We should leave, Ambassador. Our ship is ready. If war starts, Earth is too young to survive it. The shockwaves will reach our space within days. Sarah shook her head. She kept watching the 2 leaders. She saw something others might have missed. Under all the posturing and arguments, both Vex and Thel looked afraid. Vex's logical mind had calculated the casualties. Even if the collective won, they would lose billions of lives. Thel's empathic senses felt the coming death. She could sense the fear of every being in the pact. They do not want this war, Sarah whispered to Marcus. They are terrified, but they cannot stop it. Then who can? Marcus asked. Sarah did not answer. She was thinking about Earth. She was thinking about human history. Humans had almost destroyed themselves many times. There had been wars between nations. There had been moments when nuclear weapons were seconds from launch. But somehow, humans had survived. Not because they were smarter than other species. Not because they were more peaceful. They survived because they could think in ways that seemed crazy to everyone else. Humans could look at a problem and say, both sides are right and both sides are wrong. Humans could hold 2 opposite ideas in their heads at the same time. Logic and emotion, reason and feeling, math and art, science and spirit. Other species had to choose one or the other. Humans chose both. The arguments in the council chamber grew louder. Vex was now listing casualty projections. Thel was describing the spiritual emptiness that would come from losing the sacred sites. Neither was listening to the other anymore. They were just shouting into the void. A warning alarm sounded. The timer showed 45 minutes remaining. On the hologram displays around the chamber, they could see both fleets. Thousands of ships on each side, weapons charging, shields activating, soldiers preparing for orders to fire. Some of the younger species began to leave the chamber. They were running to their ships. They wanted to get far away before the shooting started. No one stopped them. Even the security forces were nervous. Marcus tugged on Sarah's sleeve. Ambassador, please, we have to go. Now. Sarah stood up, but she did not walk toward the exit. She walked forward, down the aisle, toward the center of the chamber, toward the 2 leaders who were still arguing, still locked in their impossible conflict. Marcus called after her, but she did not stop. Other delegates stared as the human ambassador walked past them. Some looked confused. Some looked amused. The human child wanted to speak. Now, when the galaxy was ending, Sarah reached the central podium. She pressed the button to activate the speaker system. Her voice would now be heard by everyone in the chamber and transmitted to every ship in both fleets. She took a breath. Her hands shook slightly, but her voice was steady when she spoke. Chancellor Vex, Harmonarch Thel. She paused, making sure they were listening. You are both right, and you are both wrong. The chamber went quiet. Even the alarm seemed to fade. Everyone was looking at the human now, the young species that barely understood how the galaxy worked. What could she possibly say that millions of years of wisdom had not already tried? Sarah looked at the timer on the wall. 8 minutes and 14 seconds remained. She had 8 minutes to save the galaxy. She began to speak. Sarah Chen stood at the central podium with all eyes on her. The massive council chamber was silent for the first time in hours. Chancellor Vex's 8 arms had stopped moving. Harmonarch Thel's colors had frozen in place. They were all waiting to hear what the human had to say. Sarah felt the weight of every gaze. Thousands of alien beings watched her. Behind them, billions more watched through live feeds. 2 massive war fleets waited for her words. She had never felt so small and so important at the same time. "I want to tell you a story," Sarah began. Her voice was quiet but clear. "It happened on Earth about 60 years ago, back when humans did not even know you existed, back when we were alone in the universe, or so we thought." Vex's arms twitched with impatience. His translator device clicked. "We do not have time for stories, human. We have 7 minutes left." "This story will only take a minute," Sarah replied, "and it might save all of our lives." "Will you listen?" Something in her voice made Vex pause. Thel's musical tones chimed softly. "Let the child speak." "We will listen." Sarah nodded her thanks. She called up a hologram from her datapad. It showed Earth as it was in 1962. Blue oceans, green and brown continents, white clouds, a beautiful world. In this year, Sarah said, humans came very close to destroying themselves. Our world was divided into 2 great powers. One was called the United States. The other was the Soviet Union. They hated each other. They feared each other. And they both had weapons that could destroy entire cities in seconds. The hologram changed. It showed missiles, warheads, military bases. The Soviet Union decided to put nuclear missiles on an island near the United States. The island was called Cuba. The United States said no. They said if the missiles stayed, there would be war. The Soviet Union refused to remove the missiles. For 13 days, both sides stood at the edge of war. One mistake, one nervous soldier, one misunderstood order. That was all it would take to end human civilization. Several species in the chamber made sounds of recognition. They understood this situation. 2 powers, no compromise, inevitable war. It was the oldest story in the galaxy. "How did you survive?" asked an elder species called the Watchers. Their representative was a floating sphere of liquid. It pulsed with curiosity. "That is the interesting part," Sarah said. "The leaders on both sides were trapped. Just like you are now. The American president could not back down. If he did, he would look weak. His enemies would say he let the other side win. His own people might remove him from power. The Soviet leader had the same problem. If he removed the missiles, his own military might rebel. His people would think he was a coward." Thel's colors flickered. She understood, "I see. The spiritual weight of leadership. Neither could move without losing face, without betraying everything they stood for." "Exactly," Sarah said, and the mathematics made it worse. Each side calculated that if war started, they might win. The numbers said it was possible. So the logical choice was to prepare for war. Vex leaned forward. "Then how did war not happen, if logic and honor both demanded it?" "Because," Sarah said softly, "humans found a third way. We did not choose logic over emotion. We did not choose emotion over logic. We found something in between, something messy and imperfect. We made a deal." The hologram changed again. It showed diplomats meeting in secret, messages being passed, compromises being written. The Soviet Union agreed to remove the missiles from Cuba. But in exchange, the United States removed some of their own missiles from Turkey. Neither side got everything they wanted. The mathematics said it was not perfectly efficient. The emotional weight said it was not perfectly honorable. But it was good enough. It was enough to live with. "Good enough," Vex repeated. His translator made the words sound strange, as if the concept did not translate properly. "You chose an inferior solution? One that satisfied neither logic nor honor?" "We chose to survive," Sarah said. "Perfect solutions are for species that have forever to find them. We only had days. We chose the messy compromise over the perfect grave." The chamber was quiet. Sarah could see the beings around her processing this idea. To the collective, compromise was inefficient. To the pact, compromise was spiritually incomplete. But to humans, compromise was how you stayed alive. Thel's voice was soft now, less like anger, more like wonder. Your species lives in the middle, between logic and emotion, between mind and heart. You do not have to choose. We cannot choose, Sarah corrected gently. We are not built like you. When the collective thinks, you think with pure logic. When the pact feels, you feel with pure emotion. It is who you are. It makes you strong in your own ways, but it also traps you. You cannot see solutions that need both logic and emotion at the same time. She brought up another hologram. This one showed human art and science side by side, mathematical equations drawn in beautiful patterns, music written using physics, buildings that were both structurally perfect and emotionally moving. Look at what humans create, she said. We make art that follows mathematical rules. We write music using algorithms and emotion together. We build structures that are efficient and beautiful. We do not see these as opposites. They are partners. Vex's arms moved in patterns that Sarah had learned meant he was thinking deeply. But the disputed system, he said slowly. The mathematics are clear. We need those resources. How can compromise change the numbers? And the sacred sites, Thel added. How can compromise make them less holy? How can we share what is spiritually whole? Sarah looked at the timer. 4 minutes and 30 seconds. Her heart was beating fast, but she kept her voice calm. What if, she said carefully, both of you are asking the wrong question? Explain, Vex demanded. You are asking who owns the system, Sarah said. Who gets the resources? Who controls the sacred sites? These are yes or no questions. Someone wins, someone loses. But what if you asked a different question? What if you asked, how can both of us benefit from this system? Impossible, Vex said immediately. Resource allocation cannot serve two masters. The inefficiency would be catastrophic. Unworkable, Thel agreed. Sacred ground cannot be shared with those who do not understand its meaning. The spiritual contamination would be too great. Sarah took a breath. She was about to suggest something that would sound insane to both sides, but it was the only chance they had. What if, she said, neither of you owned the system? What if you shared it? The chamber erupted. Both sides began shouting. Sharing resources was inefficient. Sharing sacred ground was impossible. The noise was overwhelming. Sarah raised her voice. Not sharing like dividing, not splitting it in half. True sharing. Joint stewardship. You take turns. The collective manages the resource extraction for 10 years. Then the pact manages it for 10 years. You rotate forever. The protests grew louder. This was madness. Who would ensure fairness? Who would prevent cheating? Who would make the final decisions? A council, Sarah said loudly, made of both collective and pact members, with a human mediator as the tiebreaker. We will help you translate between logic and emotion. We will help you find compromises when you get stuck. Vex's arms were moving in rapid patterns. His translator was clicking so fast it was hard to understand. The inefficiency, he said. The administrative overhead. The loss of optimal resource extraction. The numbers are terrible. The spiritual impurity, Thel sang. How can we maintain the sanctity of our sites if those who do not understand them have access? How can we trust them not to damage what is sacred? Sarah pulled up one final hologram. It showed casualty projections for the coming war. Billions dead, whole species extinct, planets burned. Both sides had run these numbers. Both sides knew what was coming. Yes, Sarah said quietly. My solution is inefficient. Yes, it is spiritually imperfect. But compare it to this. She gestured to the death counts. Is perfect efficiency worth this? Is spiritual purity worth this? The timer showed 2 minutes and 47 seconds. Humans have a saying, Sarah continued. We say that perfect is the enemy of good. When you chase perfection, you often end up with nothing. Sometimes good enough is actually better than perfect because good enough is real. Good enough keeps you alive. She looked directly at Vex. Chancellor, your logic is perfect. Your mathematics are flawless, but they led you here. To this moment. To this choice between war and compromise. Is your logic so perfect that it is worth billions of deaths? She turned to Thel. Harmonarch, your emotional truth is genuine. Your spiritual connection is real, but it led you here too, to the same choice. Is your truth so pure that it is worth destroying everything you claim to hold sacred? The chamber was silent again. Every being was waiting for the two leaders to respond. Vex's arms slowly stopped moving. His voice was quieter now. You are saying our strength has become our weakness, I am saying, Sarah replied gently, that every strength has a shadow. Logic without emotion becomes cold. Emotion without logic becomes chaos. You need each other, even if you do not want to admit it. Thel's colors shifted. They moved from red anger to blue sadness to green uncertainty. And humans, she sang softly. Humans stand in the middle. You are the bridge we did not know we needed. We are young, Sarah said. We are inexperienced. We do not have your wisdom or your knowledge, but we have something you lost millions of years ago. We have the ability to be incomplete, to be uncertain, to say we do not know and still try to find an answer. The timer showed 1 minute and 12 seconds. Chancellor Vex, Harmonarch Thel, Sarah said, "You have 1 minute to decide, perfect war or imperfect peace. Which do you choose?" The galaxy held its breath. The timer on the wall showed 58 seconds. Sarah Chen watched the two leaders across from her. Chancellor Vex stood perfectly still. His 8 arms were frozen in place. Harmonarch Thel's colors had stopped moving. They were both calculating, both considering. The fate of the galaxy hung in the balance. Around the chamber, delegates from hundreds of species waited. Some had stopped breathing. Others were sending prayers to whatever gods they believed in. The younger species near the exits were ready to run. Everyone knew these next seconds would change everything. 45 seconds. On the holographic displays, the 2 war fleets hung in space. Sarah could see the weapons charging. She could see the shields reaching full power. Soldiers sat at firing controls. Commanders waited for orders. Both sides were ready. 1 word, 1 signal. That was all it would take. Marcus stood behind Sarah. Her young assistant's face was pale with fear. He whispered to her, "Ambassador, if they say no, we have to run. Our ship is fast, but not that fast." Sarah did not respond. She kept her eyes on the 2 leaders. She saw something in them that gave her hope. Vex's arms were not moving, but his eyes were. They flicked between the casualty projections and the resource calculations. He was weighing numbers. Death versus efficiency. Logic versus survival. Thel's colors were frozen, but deep inside her crystal body, small lights were moving. They pulsed and shifted. Sarah had studied the packed species. She knew those lights meant Thel was feeling millions of emotions at once. Fear, anger, hope, grief, all spinning together. 30 seconds. Vex suddenly spoke. His voice echoed through the chamber. "The human makes a point." His translator clicked in word. "Our projections show that even if we win the war, we will lose 32% of our population. The resource gain from the disputed system would not recover that loss for 400 years. Logically, the war is inefficient." Murmurs ran through the collective delegation. Some agreed. Others protested. But Vex raised 1 arm for silence. However, he continued, "The human proposal is also inefficient. Joint stewardship would reduce resource extraction by 18%. Rotating control every 10 years creates administrative costs. The mathematics are not optimal." 20 seconds. "But," Vex said slowly, 18% loss is better than 32% loss. Imperfect mathematics is better than death." A shockwave went through the chamber. The leader of the collective had just admitted that pure logic was not enough. He had chosen survival over perfection. Some of the collective delegates looked stunned. Others looked relieved. All eyes turned to Harmonarch Thel. Her colors began to move again. Red anger, blue sadness, green uncertainty, yellow hope. They swirled faster and faster. 15 seconds. "I feel the fear of every being in the pact," Thel sang. Her voice was softer now. Less like anger, more like grief. "I feel their terror. I feel their love for their children. I feel their desperate hope that somehow this will end without war. These feelings are real. They are true. They are more powerful than any logic. But," she continued, "I also feel something else. I feel their desire to live, to see tomorrow, to hold their loved ones again. And I realize that no sacred site, no matter how holy, is worth more than the lives of those who would worship there." 10 seconds. The packed delegation made sounds of surprise. Some agreed with their leader. Others looked betrayed. But Thel's voice grew stronger. "The human child asked me a question. She asked if my truth was so pure that it was worth destroying everything I hold sacred. And I realized something. The most sacred thing is life itself, not places, not sites, not even honor. Life, the chance to feel, to love, to exist. 5 seconds. Thel's colors shifted to a clear, bright blue, the color of decision, the color of peace. She looked across at Chancellor Vex. "Chancellor," she sang, "do you agree to the human proposal? Joint stewardship of the disputed system? Rotating control? A council with human mediation?" 3 seconds. Vex's arms moved in a complex pattern. It was a gesture of agreement, of acceptance, of peace. "I agree," he said. "Let the fleet stand down. Let the war end before it begins." 2 seconds. Sarah felt her legs go weak with relief. She wanted to sit down. She wanted to cry. She wanted to laugh. Instead, she kept her voice steady. "Then let us send the stand-down order, now." 1 second. Vex and Thel both activated their communicators. Emergency signals went out to both fleets. "Stand down. Do not fire. Peace has been found. Return to base." The timer hit 0. For one terrible moment, nothing happened. The holographic display still showed the fleets in attack position. Weapons still charged. Sarah held her breath. Had the orders arrived in time? Had the commanders received them? Would they listen? Then one by one the weapons powered down. Shields dropped. Ships began to turn away. The collective fleet started moving back toward their space. The packed fleet did the same. They were leaving. The war was not happening. A sound filled the chamber. It started small. One delegate began to cry with relief. Then another, then 10. Then 100. Soon the whole room was filled with sounds of emotion. Some species wept. Others sang. Some made sounds that had no human equivalent. But all of them expressed the same thing: joy, relief, gratitude, hope. Sarah felt Marcus grab her arm. He was laughing and crying at the same time. "We did it," he kept saying. "We did it." We actually did it. But Sarah was watching the two leaders. Vex and Thel stood facing each other across the chamber. For millions of years, their kinds had been separate. Logic and emotion, mind and heart. They had never truly understood each other. They had never tried. Slowly, carefully, Vex extended one of his 8 arms. It was a gesture of peace, a gesture of respect, of willingness to try something new. Thel looked at the extended arm. Her colors flickered through uncertainty. Then they settled on gold, the color of new beginnings. She reached out with one crystalline appendage and touched Vex's arm. The contact lasted only a moment, but in that moment something changed. The collective and the pact were no longer separate enemies. They were not friends yet. They were not allies. But they were no longer enemies. They were something new, something that had never existed before in galactic history. They were partners, uncertain partners, uncomfortable partners, but partners who had chosen to try. The celebration in the chamber continued. Delegates from neutral species were already proposing celebrations. Treaties needed to be written. Details needed to be worked out. A formal council needed to be established. There was so much work to do, but for now everyone just felt relief. The galaxy had been seconds from destruction. Billions of lives had been hanging in the balance, and somehow, impossibly, they had survived. An elder species approached Sarah. It was one of the Watchers. The floating sphere of liquid came to rest before her. Its voice was like wind chimes. "Young human," it said, "you have done something remarkable today. You showed the old ones a truth they had forgotten." "What truth?" Sarah asked. "That certainty is the luxury of the doomed. That flexibility is the price of survival. That sometimes the best answer is not the perfect answer, but the one that lets everyone live to see tomorrow." The Watcher paused. Then it asked a question. "How did you know they would listen?" "How did you know your words would be enough?" Sarah thought about this. She looked across the chamber at Vex and Thel. They were talking now. Actually talking. Trying to understand each other. It looked awkward. It looked difficult. But they were trying. "I did not know," Sarah admitted. "I was terrified. I thought they might refuse. I thought we might all die. But I saw something in them. Under all the logic and emotion, under all the posturing and pride, I saw fear. Real fear. And I knew that fear meant they did not want this war. They just did not know how to stop it. So you gave them permission to stop," the Watcher said. "You showed them it was acceptable to choose survival over pride, to choose life over perfection." "I guess so," Sarah said. "Humans are good at that. We have had a lot of practice almost destroying ourselves. We have learned that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is admit you were wrong." That sometimes the strongest thing you can do is compromise. The Watcher pulsed with what might have been approval. Your species is very young. But perhaps youth is what the galaxy needs. Fresh eyes, new ideas. The willingness to question what everyone else takes for granted. The elder being floated away, leaving Sarah alone with her thoughts. Around her, the celebration continued. Species that had been preparing for war were now talking about peace. Enemies were becoming partners. The impossible was happening. Marcus appeared at her side again. He was grinning like a fool. "Ambassador," he said, "do you realize what you just did? You saved the galaxy. You stopped a war that everyone said was inevitable. You are going to be famous. You are going to be a hero." Sarah shook her head. "I am not a hero. I just told a story. I just suggested an idea. Vex and Thel are the ones who had the courage to listen. They are the ones who chose peace over pride. They are the heroes, but without you, none of this would have happened." "Maybe," Sarah said, "but that is how it always works, isn't it? Change does not come from one person. It comes from many people all choosing to try something new." Vex chose to question his logic. Thel chose to question her emotions. I just helped them see that questioning was okay. She looked around the chamber one more time, at all the different species, all the different ways of thinking, all the different ways of being. For so long, the galaxy had been divided, logic versus emotion, mind versus heart, collective versus pact. But now, for the first time, there was a bridge, a way for the two sides to communicate, to understand, to work together, and that bridge had a name. It was called humanity, young, inexperienced, uncertain humanity, the species that lived in the messy middle, the species that could think and feel at the same time, the species that knew how to compromise because they had no other choice. Sarah smiled. She did not know what tomorrow would bring. She did not know if the peace would last. She did not know if the joint stewardship would work. There would be problems. There would be arguments. There would be difficulties, but at least there would be a tomorrow. At least the shooting had stopped. At least the galaxy would survive to see another day. And sometimes that was enough. 3 weeks had passed since the day the galaxy almost ended. Sarah Chen stood in the observation room of the newly created Terran Protocol Station. Through the clear walls, she could see the disputed system. 7 planets orbited a yellow sun. They looked peaceful now, beautiful. It was hard to believe that just weeks ago 2 massive fleets had been ready to destroy everything for control of these worlds. The station itself was something new. It was built by both the collective and the pact working together. Half of it was made with the precise mathematical architecture of the collective, perfect angles, efficient designs, every centimeter serving a purpose. The other half was built in the flowing, organic style of the pact, curves and spirals, art and beauty. Space is designed to inspire emotion. Where the two halves met, there was a strange beauty, logic and emotion blending together. It should not have worked. But somehow it did, just like the treaty. Just like the peace. Sarah heard footsteps behind her. She turned to see Marcus approaching. Her assistant looked tired but happy. He had been working 20-hour days helping to set up the new administrative council. There were so many details to work out, so many problems to solve. "The first council meeting is in an hour," Marcus said. "Representatives from both sides are already arriving. Some of them still look like they want to kill each other." Sarah smiled slightly. "That is normal. Peace is harder than war. In war, everything is simple. You just destroy the enemy. In peace, you have to talk to them, work with them, understand them. That is much harder." "Do you think it will work?" Marcus asked. "Really work long term?" Sarah looked back out at the planets. "I do not know." Honest answer. "This could fall apart tomorrow. One wrong word, one misunderstanding, one moment where old anger becomes stronger than new hope. And we could be right back where we started." "That is not very reassuring," Marcus said with a nervous laugh. "But," Sarah continued, "that is true for any peace. Every peace is fragile. Every treaty can be broken. The question is not whether it might fail. The question is whether we keep trying even knowing it might fail. And I think these species will try, because they remember how close they came to destroying everything." The door to the observation room opened. Chancellor Vex entered. His 8 arms moved in the gesture that Sarah had learned meant respect. Behind him came several of his advisors. They were all members of the collective, all logical, calculating minds that had spent their entire existence believing emotion was weakness. Ambassador Chen, Vex said. His translator clicked and hummed. I wanted to speak with you before the meeting begins. Of course, Chancellor. What can I do for you? Vex's arms moved in patterns Sarah was starting to recognize. This one indicated uncertainty, an emotion. She realized with surprise that the leader of the collective was learning to show feelings. I have been studying human history, Vex said. Your wars, your conflicts, your methods of making peace. I have noticed something interesting. What is that? Humans fight wars with both logic and passion. You calculate strategies, but you also fight for things you believe in. You make peace treaties with legal precision, but you also forgive old enemies. You are never one thing or the other. You are always both, Sarah nodded. That is true. We do not have a choice. Our brains are built to use both logic and emotion. We cannot separate them even if we wanted to. The collective has always believed this made you weak, Vex said. We believed pure logic was superior, but I am beginning to understand that we were wrong. Your ability to hold contradictions makes you flexible. It makes you able to see solutions we cannot. One of Vex's advisors made a sharp clicking sound. It was a protest. The advisor spoke in the language of the collective. Sarah's translator turned it into words she could understand. This is heresy, the advisor was saying. Pure logic has guided us for millions of years. We cannot abandon our nature. Vex turned to his advisor. His voice was firm. I'm not suggesting we abandon logic. I am suggesting we expand it. We nearly destroyed ourselves and billions of others because we could not see beyond our calculations. The humans showed us that sometimes the mathematically imperfect solution is the one that works. The advisor fell silent, but Sarah could see the conflict in the being's posture. Change was hard for the collective. Their entire civilization was built on the foundation of pure logic. Questioning that foundation felt dangerous. Before Sarah could respond, another door opened. Harmonarch Thel entered with her own group of advisors. Her crystal body glowed with shifting colors. Today they were soft pastels, peaceful colors, but Sarah could see deeper shades moving underneath. Uncertainty, worry, hope. Chancellor, Harmonarch. Sarah greeted them both. I'm glad you are both here. We should talk before the formal meeting begins. Thel's musical voice filled the room. We share this concern. The first council meeting will set the tone for everything that follows. We must get it right. Getting it right means different things to each of you, Sarah said gently. Chancellor Vex will want clear rules and procedures. Harmonarch Thel will want to ensure everyone's feelings are considered. You will need to compromise, both of you. One of Thel's advisors spoke up. This being looked like a cloud of glowing mist. Its voice was like wind through trees. How can we compromise on matters of the spirit? Either something honors the sacred or it does not. There is no middle ground. And how can we compromise on efficiency? Vex's advisor added, either a system works optimally or it does not. Partial success is simply partial failure. Sarah looked at both advisors. She understood their positions. They were right in their own ways, but they were also trapped in old patterns of thinking. Let me tell you about another moment in human history, Sarah said. In 1945, the Second World War ended. Two countries that had been bitter enemies, America and Japan, faced a choice. They could stay enemies forever. They could demand perfect justice. They could refuse to compromise. Or they could try something new. What did they choose? Thel asked. They chose to rebuild together. The winners helped the losers recover. The losers accepted help from the winners. It was imperfect. It was awkward. Many people on both sides were angry about it. But over time, these two enemies became allies. Today, they are partners. How is this relevant? Vex asked. Because, Sarah said, perfect solutions do not exist, not in the real world. You can have perfect logic in theory. You can have perfect emotions in your heart. But when those theories meet reality, when those feelings have to work with other people's feelings, perfection becomes impossible. And that is okay. She gestured to the station around them. This station is not perfect. The collective part is too rigid for the pact. The pact part is too chaotic for the collective. But it works, it exists. It brings you together. That is what matters. Vex's arms moved slowly. I am beginning to understand. You are saying that the value of a solution is not its perfection, but its ability to allow progress. Thel's colors shifted to a warm gold. And you are saying that the deepest spiritual truth is not purity but connection. Not isolation, but relationship. Even imperfect relationship. Yes, Sarah said. Exactly, yes. You both understand. Now you need to help your people understand. The advisors on both sides still looked uncertain. But Vex and Thel exchanged a look. They were the leaders. They had made the choice for peace. Now they had to make it work. The council meeting began an hour later. Representatives from both the collective and the pact sat around a large circular table. Humans as the mediators sat between them. Sarah was in the center. She felt the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. The first issue was simple but important. They needed to decide how resources would be extracted from the disputed system. The collective wanted to use their efficient but harsh methods. The pact wanted to use their gentle but slow methods. Both sides argued. Both sides had good points. Sarah listened carefully. She did not interrupt. She let both sides speak. She let them argue. She let them express their frustrations. And slowly she saw something happening. They were listening to each other. Really listening. Not just waiting for their turn to speak, but actually hearing what the other side was saying. Finally, a collective representative said something interesting. Perhaps we could use our extraction methods, but at a slower pace, to minimize environmental damage. A pact representative responded immediately. And perhaps we could accept some efficiency loss if it means preserving more of the planet's natural beauty. Sarah smiled. They were doing it. Without her having to push them, they were finding the middle ground themselves. Logic and emotion working together. The meeting lasted for hours. There were disagreements. There were moments of tension. But there was no war, no threats, just talking, just trying to understand, just searching for solutions that both sides could accept. When the meeting finally ended, both Vex and Thel looked exhausted. But they also looked satisfied. They had made progress. Not perfect progress. Not easy progress. But real progress. As the delegates filed out, Thel approached Sarah. Her colors were soft blue and green. "Peaceful colors, Ambassador," she sang quietly. "I wanted to thank you. Not just for preventing the war, but for showing us a new way to think." "I did not show you anything you did not already know," Sarah said. "I just reminded you that there were options you had forgotten." Thel's colors shifted to thoughtful purple. For millions of years, the pact has believed that emotion and spirit were the highest truths. We look down on the collective for their cold logic. But you helped me see that we need them. Their clarity, their precision, their ability to see past the fog of feeling. And they need you, Sarah said. Your warmth, your empathy, your understanding that not everything can be calculated. Vex joined them. His arms moved in that gesture of respect. The human is correct. The collective has spent millions of years perfecting our logic. We believed it made us superior. But logic without compassion is just cruelty with mathematics. We need what the pact has, just as they need what we have and you need us, Sarah added with a small smile, to remind you both when you are getting too stuck in your own ways of thinking, to be the bridge between mind and heart. Thel and Vex looked at each other. Then they both made gestures of agreement. Yes, we need you, humanity, the youngest species, the most inexperienced, the ones who still make mistakes and admit it. You are exactly what the galaxy needs. That night, Sarah stood alone in the observation room again. She looked out at the 7 planets. Ships from both the collective and the pact moved peacefully through the system, working together, sharing resources, learning from each other. It was not perfect. It would never be perfect. There would be more arguments tomorrow, more disagreements, more challenges, but the galaxy was still here, still alive, still trying, and that, Sarah thought, was more than enough. 6 months had passed since the galaxy changed forever. Sarah Chen sat in a classroom unlike any that had existed before. The room was filled with young beings from dozens of species. Some were from the collective, some were from the pact, some were from neutral worlds. All of them were here to learn something new. They were here to learn about compromise, about negotiation, about finding solutions that worked even when they were not perfect. They were here to learn the human way. Sarah stood at the front of the class. She had been appointed as the first director of the Galactic Mediation Academy. It was a fancy title that made her uncomfortable. She was only 32 years old. On Earth, she would still be considered young for such an important position. In galactic terms, she was practically a child. But the galaxy had learned something in the past 6 months. Age did not always equal wisdom. Sometimes the youngest voice in the room had the most important thing to say. Today, Sarah was teaching a difficult lesson. She had brought 2 of her students to the front of the class. One was a young member of the collective. It looked like a smaller version of Chancellor Vex with 6 arms instead of 8. The other was a young member of the Pact. It was a small crystalline being that glowed with soft rainbow colors. "I want you to work together to solve a problem," Sarah said. "There is a transport ship that can carry supplies to a distant colony. The collective says the ship should take the most efficient route, even though it passes through dangerous space. The Pact says the ship should take the safe route, even though it is slower and uses more fuel. You have 5 minutes to find a solution both sides can accept." The 2 young aliens looked at each other with uncertainty. Then they began to talk. The collective student immediately started with numbers and calculations. The Pact student responded with concerns about the crew's emotional well-being and safety. Sarah watched them carefully. She did not interrupt. She let them struggle with the problem. That was part of the lesson. Learning to bridge the gap between logic and emotion was hard. It took practice. It took patience. It took the willingness to be uncomfortable. After 3 minutes, the collective student said something interesting. "What if we take the efficient route, but we add extra safety systems to the ship? It would cost more, but the crew would be safer and the trip would still be reasonably fast." The Pact students' colors brightened. "That is a good idea. And what if we schedule regular rest stops along the way, so the crew does not become too stressed? It would add a little more time, but everyone would feel better." Sarah smiled. The 2 students were doing it. They were finding the middle ground. Neither was getting exactly what they wanted, but both were working towards something they could accept. When the 5 minutes ended, the 2 students presented their solution to the class. It was not perfect. The collective student admitted the safety additions made the trip less efficient. The Pact student admitted the route was still more dangerous than they would like. But it was a solution. It was workable. It was enough. Sarah addressed the whole class. "This is what compromise looks like. Not perfect for anyone, not exactly what you want, but good enough for everyone. And sometimes good enough is the best we can do. Sometimes good enough is actually excellent." A student in the back raised a limb. The being was from a neutral species that had watched the near war with terror. Its voice was hesitant. "But Ambassador, how do we know when to compromise? How do we know when to hold firm on what we believe?" Sarah thought about this question carefully. It was a good question. Maybe the most important question. "Humans have struggled with this for thousands of years," she said. "We have fought wars over principles. We have also made peace through compromise. I cannot give you a perfect answer, but I can tell you what humans have learned." She walked to the window. Outside, the Terran Protocol Station orbited peacefully. Ships from a dozen species came and went. Resources were being shared. Knowledge was being exchanged. The galaxy was learning to work together. "Compromise on methods," Sarah said. "Hold firm on values. If someone wants to hurt innocent people, do not compromise on that. If someone wants to destroy what is precious, do not compromise on that. But if someone just has a different way of achieving the same goal, then compromise. Find the path you can walk together." The class murmured in understanding. These young beings were the future. They would grow up in a galaxy that was learning to see past old divisions. They would build bridges their parents never imagined possible. After the class ended, Sarah walked through the station. Everywhere she looked, she saw signs of change. Collective scientists working with Pact artists to create new technologies that were both efficient and beautiful. Pact counselors helping collective workers understand their own emotions. Species that had been enemies for millions of years now sharing meals and stories. It was not all smooth. There were still arguments. There were still misunderstandings. Just last week, a collective engineer and a Pact designer had gotten into a shouting match about how to build a new sector of the station. But they had worked it out. With human mediation, they had found a solution. Sarah found Chancellor Vex in one of the meeting rooms. He was alone, studying reports on his data displays. When he saw her, his arms moved in greeting. "Ambassador, I was hoping to speak with you." "Of course, Chancellor. What is on your mind?" Vex's arms moved in patterns that Sarah now recognized as embarrassment. A strange emotion for a being of pure logic to show. "I have been thinking about that day 6 months ago. The day you stopped the war. I have been analyzing what happened, trying to understand it from a logical perspective. And what have you concluded? That I was wrong? His translator made the words sound stark, simple, but Sarah knew how hard they must have been for him to say. For millions of years, I believed that logic was enough, that pure reason could solve any problem. But I was trapped in my own logic. I could not see solutions that required both thought and feeling. You were not wrong, Sarah said gently. You were incomplete, just as the pact was incomplete. You both had part of the truth. You just needed someone to help you see the whole picture. Vex looked at her with what might have been curiosity. How does your species do it? How do you use both logic and emotion at the same time? It seems impossible. It is not easy, Sarah admitted. Humans argue with ourselves all the time. Our hearts say one thing, our heads say another. We have to find balance, and we do not always succeed. But we try. We keep trying. Perhaps that is the real lesson, Vex said thoughtfully. Not that you have found the perfect balance, but that you keep searching for it. That you accept imperfection as part of existence, yes, exactly. Sarah felt a surge of hope. If Vex could understand this, then others could too. The galaxy could change. It was changing. Later that evening, Sarah met with Harmonarch Thel in the observation dome. The crystalline being's colors were deeper than usual, more complex. Sarah had learned that this meant Thel was experiencing profound emotions. The galaxy is changing, Ambassador, Thel sang. Her voice was filled with wonder. 6 months ago, we were enemies preparing for war. Now we are partners learning to understand each other. How did this happen so quickly? It did not happen quickly, Sarah said. It has been building for a long time. Both your species were tired of the conflict. Both of you wanted a better way. You just needed someone to show you it was possible. Thel's colors shifted to warm gold. You underestimate what you did. You gave us hope. You showed us that our differences could be strengths instead of weaknesses. I have been working with Chancellor Vex, Thel continued. We are planning something new. A joint project. Collective engineers and pact artists working together to build something that has never existed before. What kind of project? Sarah asked. A memorial, Thel said. To commemorate the day we almost destroyed everything, and the day we chose a different path. It will be both logical and emotional, precise and beautiful. A symbol of what we can achieve together. Sarah felt tears forming in her eyes. She tried to hide them, but Thel noticed. You are crying, Thel observed. Her color shifted to concerned blue. Are you sad? No, Sarah wiped her eyes and smiled. Humans sometimes cry when we are happy. It is one of the strange ways we express emotion. I am crying because I am proud of you. Proud of all of you. We should be proud of you, Thel said. You saved us. You saved the galaxy. No, Sarah said firmly. You saved yourselves. I just showed you the door. You were the ones brave enough to walk through it. That night, Sarah sent a message back to Earth. She told her family and friends about everything that had happened. About the classes she was teaching. About the changes she was seeing. About the hope she felt for the future. She also told them something else. Something she had been thinking about for weeks. For 50 years, she wrote, humans have been the youngest species in the galaxy. We were the newcomers. The inexperienced ones. The species that did not really matter. But I think we have finally found our place. Not as warriors. Not as geniuses. But as bridges. As translators between different ways of thinking. As reminders that certainty is not strength and flexibility is not weakness. The galaxy needed us. They just did not know it until the moment came. And when that moment arrived, humanity was ready. Not because we were perfect, but because we were willing to try. 3 years later, Sarah stood at the unveiling of the memorial. It was exactly as Thel had described, a structure that combined the mathematical precision of the collective with the flowing beauty of the pact. Logic and emotion made physical. Thought and feeling in perfect balance. Thousands of beings from across the galaxy had come to see it. The memorial was not just a monument to the near war. It was a symbol of everything that had changed. A reminder that the impossible was possible if you were willing to try. At the center of the memorial was a plaque. It had words in hundreds of languages, but they all said the same thing. Sarah had written them herself. The plaque read, On this day the galaxy stood at the edge of destruction. 2 great powers prepared for war. Logic demanded it. Emotion demanded it. Death seemed inevitable. But one species showed us another way. Not because they were wiser, not because they were stronger, but because they knew how to hold two truths at once, because they understood that sometimes the best answer is not the perfect answer, because they chose life over pride, in memory of the war that never happened, in celebration of the peace we found instead. May we never forget that certainty is the luxury of the extinct, flexibility is the price of survival, and together, we are stronger than alone. Sarah read the words and smiled. She was older now. She had seen 3 years of hard work building this peace, 3 years of arguments and compromises, 3 years of slow, difficult progress, but the peace was holding. The Terran protocol was working. The galaxy was learning. Marcus stood beside her. He was no longer her assistant. Now he ran his own mediation program on another station, but he had come back for the unveiling. "Do you think it will last?" he asked quietly. 100 years from now, will they still remember what almost happened? "I do not know," Sarah said honestly. "Maybe they will forget. Maybe one day the old divisions will return. Maybe this peace is just temporary. That is not very optimistic." "But," Sarah continued, "even if it only lasts for a little while, it is still worth it. Every day of peace is a victory. Every generation that does not know war is a gift. We cannot control the future. We can only do our best in the present. And right now, in this moment, the galaxy is at peace. That is enough." The unveiling ceremony began. Chancellor Vex and Harmonarch Thel spoke together. Their voices, logic, and emotion in harmony echoed across the station. They talked about the journey they had been on, about what they had learned, about the future they were building together, and they talked about humanity, about the young species that had shown the old galaxy something new, about the bridge builders, about the ones who stood in the middle and refused to choose a side. Sarah listened to their words and felt proud. Not proud of herself, but proud of what everyone had accomplished together. Proud of the galaxy that was slowly learning to see past old hatreds. Proud of the future they were building, one compromise at a time. That night, Sarah looked out at the stars one more time. She thought about everything that had happened. About the day she stood at that podium with 8 minutes to save the galaxy. About the fear she had felt. About the hope she had held on to. They had called humanity primitive. They had called humans too young to understand. They had looked down on the species that lived in the messy middle between logic and emotion. But in the end, that messiness had saved them all. The ability to think and feel at the same time, the willingness to admit uncertainty, the courage to say, "I do not know, but let us try." Humanity had found its place in the galaxy. Not as conquerors, not as rulers, but as teachers, as mediators, as the ones who remembered that perfect solutions were less valuable than working solutions. That purity was less important than progress. That being alive and imperfect was better than being dead and right. The human way. Messy, uncertain, incomplete, alive. And in a galaxy that had forgotten how to compromise, that was exactly what everyone needed.